In high school, I had a stalker. Here's the story. I'll try to keep it concise, but there's a lot of information for sure. I was 16 and we met on Facebook initially. He went to a school nearby, and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating actually. The first time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest and wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag number 1. Since he was a minor as well, we couldn't do anything to find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house or around town at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and quite naive. Things started to get weird though, when I noticed his family was very odd. One day we were having sex in his bedroom, and I saw his father peeking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out, and his dad ran off. Stalker guy told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us, so this wasn't the first time. I went to leave and his mom was doing crack openly in the kitchen, and this was about the time I decided it was time to break up. This is when things got bad though. He started crying and told me he's in cancer treatment, and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him we could still be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never went to class. He would just stand outside of my classroom looking inside until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period and stand outside the classroom once again. I was too intimidated to say something to him. He was 6'4" and a pretty heavy-set guy, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress, though, to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me despite living across town, and walk 10 to 15 feet behind me all the way to my house. He would stand outside, just staring up at the window until around the time my parents got home. Then he would just suddenly leave. Finally, I told him to fuck off and leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends, or even acquaintances, and to forget all about me. However, of course, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in-detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me, and the other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one and leave me more messages on that. I even woke up one day to see that overnight he had left me one of those dancing and singing snowmen on my front porch. He had stabbed it in the head, and the knife was still poking out. He had covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of, and there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice singing eerily. "I'm going to have you forever. I'm never going to let you be." I was done at this point and told my parents, who immediately contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day he ran at me like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug though. It was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1" and about 90 pounds at the time. For context, he hugged me so hard, he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried, and he started crying too before running off. He left me a voicemail apologizing in song. This one night is the night I'll never forget though, and it's the reason we got a restraining order, and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason seemingly, just was suddenly fully awake. I got up to go to my kitchen to get a glass of water to relax, and in the reflection on my fridge, I could see movement in my backyard. I couldn't see it well because it was so dark outside and so light inside, so I went to the back sliding glass door to try and get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6'4" man standing just outside the door. Stalker guy was in my backyard, directly under my room at 3 a.m., and he was just staring at me. I yelled and my parents got up, but he was long gone by the time my dad went outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way to the ground, so it's possible he could have been on top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. We got a restraining order granted shortly after that, and the stalker guy dropped out of school. I haven't seen him in person since, but every 6 months-ish, he makes a new Facebook and tries to friend request me. I just block it and report him every time, but it's pretty scary stuff. Y'all ever heard of that myth that if you wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, it's likely because something is looking at you? Well, maybe that's true. I don't know what he's doing now or where he went, but I don't care to know. I had this older roommate who lived upstairs, about 45 years old. Skinny, tall guy, a bit socially awkward. Anyway, one day, I'm chilling on my porch when he suddenly asks me if I'm gay and says he found me on Grindr, a gay dating app. I say yes, that's me, I'm gay, and we talk briefly. The 4 months that followed were probably one of the worst experiences of my life. My nightmare begins. It started with fairly normal admiration, which I ignored or politely responded to, or declined, such as asking to go to dinner, complimenting me, trying to actively hang out with me by coming into my space, hitting on me, sending me good morning texts, and then it turned into sexual texts and comments. I love the way you walk. He would send me dick pics or tell me about his hookups, come to my room, etc. Most were over text. He also messaged me on Grindr, but I ignored it. I angrily confronted him about it after the dick pic, blocked him on Grindr even though I never messaged him there, and explained to him that I was not interested at all, like 0 chance. I requested that we keep distance and only text if emergency or important for the house. He apologized and stopped. Temporarily. Anyway, some time passes by. I forget about it, but he did not. He started sending me angry texts, hostile ones, many of them homophobic and racist. I ignore them, of course. He'd send me screenshots of my social media, and here are some other things that he did. He once walked into my bedroom while I was at work. My friend was sleeping over, and he was terrified to see him. My friend kicked him out, and the roommate later denied doing this. He started doing laundry like 2 to 3 times a week, going up and down the stairs 10 times or more each time. I lived in the basement where the laundry room was, so he could see me when he would go downstairs. The landlord was informed, but of course did nothing. He would watch me from his window whenever I would enter the house. He would take my clothes out of the washer and hide them under a sofa in his room. This included my underwear, undershirts, and socks. I never even found out he did that until he moved out, and I found the clothes in his room. He told me he was going to put some magic from his culture on me, said he was Satan reincarnated. He claimed to have telekinetic powers and the ability to get his wishes granted. One time he sent me an "I really love you, but I also hate you" text on Saturday night with a picture of him clubbing and holding a drink, and then sent me nude pics. I have many other examples, but I don't want to bore you with all of these. So, you're probably thinking, why didn't I try to stop it? Well, I did. I kept records of everything I could. The landlord was informed about it several times, actually, to which he did nothing. The landlord would either ignore me or promise to take care of the issue. I later found out he did actually message my roommate, but the convo went nowhere. The landlord finally offered to put a lock on the basement door after much convincing. I called the police and informed them. They said it was a civil dispute, and there was not much they could do. I asked if they could just give him a call or something. They said they would, but I didn't get a follow-up. The only way they'd get involved is if there was a direct threat made towards me. They wouldn't even look at the texts. They just said, take it to court. I couldn't get out of my lease agreement either. I was contractually obligated to pay, so I had to remain for the remainder of my contract. I called the tenant board in my city, and they said such an issue had to be taken to court to prove that him staying in this house is unsafe for me, or I could just move out, but they couldn't void my lease agreement. I blocked his number by calling my phone provider, but this didn't stop him from finding other means and platforms to contact me. My only option was a physical threat of violence, but all my friends advised me against that. The man was seriously sick. He once told me a story that he had had a romantic partner who didn't love him back. That partner had a sudden death when his brakes didn't work as he was driving. He gave me a creepy smile right after telling the story and insinuated that he'd made it happen, so threatening him was a risk. Plus, with me waiting on a response from the police or the landlord, interacting with the guy in any way would not work in my favor. I got 2 locks, one for my bedroom and one for the basement. He would still use the laundry though. He would still use the front porch. He would still message me all the time. Would be in the shared kitchen, shared washroom. Every interaction with him was terrifying and extremely uncomfortable. He would make every effort to interact with me, to watch me, to message me, and to eavesdrop on me. Eventually his lease ends and the landlord basically forces him to move out. The roommate resisted and even threatened to stay. I still got occasional messages after he left, on Grindr out of all places. After I blocked him several times on the app, he'd make a new account weekly to message me. I never responded, not once. It was all him talking to himself. Always the same. A nice message that I ignore, followed with a hostile or overly sexual threatening message. His attempts at communication have ceased now, but Facebook and Instagram constantly recommend him as my friend. I block him, but then they just recommend him again after he makes a new account. This is a long one, so bear with me. 2 years ago, I was working for a company as a person who measures houses. Most people haven't heard of it. It's where you essentially have an iPad and you go to people's homes, draw up floor plans, and measure rooms for carpet and hardwood flooring projects. Anyone can request one, really. I was 25 at the time, and I'm a female. One of the few females that work in this position, actually. I was actually really good at the job, so they gave me a lot of work, and I usually hit between 10 to 14 houses a day, driving all over multiple towns. This house happened to be my last house of the day, right in the middle of nowhere, and I was pretty exhausted. Once I got there, I was incredibly annoyed because the customer wasn't home and was late for his appointment. 10 minutes later, he pulls up next to my car. He was a middle-aged man, balding, wearing a normal office job attire with a tie and everything. He seemed a bit awkward, but was apologetic and let me into his home. Upon entering, the house was unbelievably spotless and organized, minimal furniture, and smelled like cleaning supplies. It didn't strike me as odd at first. He had 2 cats lounging in the living room after all. He first started acting weird as I was directed to the first bedroom. He mentioned offhand, "Wow, my cats love you. They don't take to strangers like this usually." But his cats literally didn't move or come near me the whole time. I just nodded and smiled while I got to work scaling out the master bedroom on my iPad. He started to inquire about the electronics I was using. "Hey, so do they keep track of where you are on that thing?" Immediate red flag. "Yes, and my boss knows how long each job should take based on the scope of work. It's incredible technology, really." I lied without missing a beat. He agreed that it was amazing. "Oh, be careful. Don't touch the gun on the nightstand. It might go off," he chuckled. Talk about immediate spine chill. I looked up from my iPad, and sure enough, there was just a handgun sitting there on the nightstand. I knew instantly that I needed to behave like nothing was happening. Nothing that was happening was triggering alarms for me. He directed me to the second bedroom, and he said the exact same thing, warning me of a gun on the nightstand, and indeed there was one again. This was the moment I knew I was in danger. At first, I thought it was just my anxiety around guns, but at this point the tension building between us was undeniable. There were only 2 bedrooms on the scope of the work. I hastily met up with him in the kitchen and began running down the next steps, but he interrupted me. "Hey, could you measure the basement stairs? I forgot to add them to the list, and I think I might want to carpet them in the future." My heart dropped. but my stupid customer service conditioned brain could not figure out how to get away with saying no. He led me to the basement door, and you guys, there is no way he was planning on doing anything with these stairs. They were plank wooden stairs, L-shaped and leading down to a completely unfinished basement. Unfortunately, in order to get an accurate measure, I had to walk all the way down them into the basement. Meanwhile, he stood blocking the doorway, with a smile on his face, mentioning again about whether or not my boss knew where I was, to which I shortly replied, yes. Once I got down to the basement, I scanned the room quite quickly. There wasn't one, but 7 deep freezers lining the walls. In the middle of the room was a lit, low-hanging ceiling light, revealing an old television set, VHS tapes scattered on the floor, and an old recliner facing the TV. Behind the set, 2 white shelves full of VHS tapes. In this moment, I knew one of 2 things was going to happen. He was either going to let me go, or he was going to push me down the stairs. I held my breath, put a smile on my face in an attempt to act my way out of this situation, and began to climb back up. All I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. He was still blocking the door. No smile this time, though. As I got about the 5th stair from the top, I felt him hesitate, which made me hesitate as well. You could cut the tension with a knife, and I finally understood that expression. To my absolute shock and relief, after 4 seconds, he just stepped aside. I made a beeline towards the front door, not saying a word, when he stopped me again, saying, "Oh, before you go, won't you give my cats a treat? They loved you so much." He was holding a bag of cat treats. I quickly gave his cats a treat, thanked him, and practically ran out of the house. Definitely ran to my car. The second I got out of his driveway, I had the most intense panic attack and cried. I tried to call my boss, but I was in a dead zone. The truth of the matter is that my boss would not have noticed I was missing for at least 24 hours when I didn't root my day the next workday. Yes, he would have eventually been caught, as it was my last known location, but I would have been long dead. I suffered PTSD from this experience. I couldn't sleep for a week. I was petrified to work my job, but I had no choice. This day still haunts me. The worst part, I was just so fucked up, jumbled, and in denial over the experience that I forgot to write down his address. I opened an account to basically share this story in this forum. I had heard about this site for a bit and thought it would be a good place to share. Anyway, I guess I can start by sharing that I have a twin, and we are very close. And we grew up in a small town. Almost everyone knew each other, but that doesn't mean it was safe. We were always taught by our parents to be weary of strangers, and locking doors or never opening the door to strangers as well. We often stayed by ourselves after school while our parents worked, so we had plenty of experience staying home alone. When we graduated from high school, we moved to the largest city in our state and attended the state university. We left our home, but weren't too worried since we had each other. I guess this is when I shared that I don't know what in the hell made us change our perspective on safety when moving to a larger city, with greater risks and more weirdos. We've had a fair share of weirdos creeping on us, but our stupid asses never locked our doors. The funniest part about this was that we're crazy about horror movies, so we should have known better. Towards our junior and senior year of university, around 2017 to 2018, we moved to a cheaper part of the city to save on rent as our part-time jobs at the time only paid so much on campus. It was quiet and was a family area. We had a tall wooden fenced yard so nobody could see in. The place was old, but it was cute, and had some character to it, but most importantly it was cheap and close to a bus stop. It was an old fourplex, and after a year of living there, our security door broke because of rotting wood, and our landlord never got around to fixing it, despite our many requests. The front and only door to the apartment was a door with a wooden door with glass. It looked like a chocolate bar, and the glass was those squares on the bar. Sorry, I know that's kind of an awful explanation. Anyway, I often walked home from late night studying at school at around 3 a.m. by myself. I was very careless, and so was my sister. I suppose we never locked our doors because my sister was so forgetful that she never had her home keys with her. I didn't want her to have to worry about staying outside for hours until I was out of school or work. We never thought anything could happen to us. I mean, that was only in the movies. Which is why I will say that it was divine intervention, or perhaps just crazy luck, that for that night, for no real reason, the door of our apartment just happened to be locked. It was on a Saturday night. I can't remember too well what happened before the whole ordeal, but I think my sister and I went home after a brief night at a bar having a beer and walking home together. My sister and I never did really have many friends or acquaintances, let alone tell the one or two friends we did have where we lived, partly because we did not have a new or nice place to have anyone over without apologizing. So when we heard our broken and old wooden gate door open right next to our bedroom window at around 4 a.m., we immediately woke up, not alarmed, but confused. Shortly after, we heard a knock on the door, persistent too. My stupid-ass sister walks with her eyes wide open, straight to the door, puts her hands on the lock and the door, just as she's about to unlock it. I was right behind her, and I was already seeing red flags. I could make out a guy in a black hoodie, covering his face, and hiding it away from the neighbor's porch light, so we couldn't see him at all. It was all happening too fast, and we had just woken up, so we were thinking maybe it was a rare friend of ours. I blurted at her to stop. I went to grab my phone in a heartbeat. It was a small apartment too, so it wasn't too far. I could hear my sister asking through the door who the creepy fuck was. He replied in a calm voice, "Just open up." I saw that he was fiddling with his phone, but I was hiding behind the hallway wall next to the tiny living room area. "No, who are you?" asked my sister. He proceeded to jiggle the door handle, which I freaked the hell out about since our locks were so shitty. I swear if he jiggled any longer, the door would have opened itself for him. That's when I told my sister I was calling 911. The asshole yelled out, "No, chill out, wait!" I knew my sister was being stupid. My heart was pounding like never before. The fucker then proceeds to say, "I know you're alone." He said this with so much ease it was almost a whisper. I fucking freaked and began to dial 911 on my iPhone right away. My sister backed up without removing her eyes from our mainly glass door. She meets me in the hallway and tells him she's calling too, but tells me not to do anything because he's leaving. Sure enough, the man simply says, "Oh, okay," and turns around and leaves. He even closes our wooden door, which, let me tell you, it's a chore to get the broken thing to close at all. My sister proceeds to tell me the person left, but I was still freaking out and couldn't calm down. We managed to go back to bed, and in the morning, we began to make sense of it all. She tells me that when she was close to him, what threw her off was that he was fiddling with his Spotify playlist. Such a weird thing to do when you're knocking on someone's door. He most likely did this to keep his face down, but my sister caught on quick enough. We called our parents to inform them what went on, and of course they flip and force us to notify the police. We do, and a cop shows up to take our complaint, but can't do anything about it since obviously they're long gone. My sister at the moment was dating a guy with a family member that had a high position in law enforcement. Retired, but he got him to help us out by doing some digging. A while passes by, and her boyfriend shares some terrifying information with us. I'll try to relay this to the best of my ability since I can only remember so much. My sister's boyfriend had a side gig as a bouncer at the college bar street and said he spoke to other bouncers that told him they had had occurrences that day of a creepy hooded man following young girls in the clubs and getting lots of complaints from them. This is probably how they saw us. God knows why they didn't make their move when we walked home in the dark. The retired family member was able to relay only a bit of information, since this wasn't some official case, and could get in trouble for doing this kind of questioning or research without a warrant or some crap like that. He notified us that there was not only one dude outside our house. I know he did in fact do some research, since my sister's friend told us his sister, managing a coffee shop in the area, had had a guy come ask about specific men, and if they were seen in the area. He left as soon as she threatened to call the police. Street cameras indicated there were 2 other men aside from the one jiggling our door handle, waiting right outside the gate next to our bedroom window, most likely to jump out as soon as we opened the door. I don't know what their mode of transportation was, but I'm sure they had something big enough to fit captives. He never told us the names of the men, only that they were under suspicion for trafficking women. I don't know what possessed my sister and I to lock our doors that night. Had it been opened, the man could have very well opened it and taken us. Needless to say, we're now very paranoid about locking up at night. I'm very grateful things turned out the way they did instead of the alternative. Please be careful about locking your doors, or walking alone at night. This shit really does happen, and it's very real.